With YouTube attacking alternative media, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon for just $1 per month. Link below. Last year was really interesting when it came to dealing with Google and the idea of whether or not it's a sexist, male-dominated environment, right? And it came to a head, absolutely, when James Damore released what is now known as the infamous Google Memo, which, you know, like a 3,000-word document that he wrote talking about the differences between men and women and how it basically applies to the STEM industry in programming. And a lot of people out there looked at it and they're like, yeah, this kind of makes some sense, right? It kind of makes some sense. And it wasn't really presented in any kind of way that was viewed as being sexist or misogynistic or bigoted or anything else like this. But given the fact that we are where we are right now in terms of our society, oh, it got this dude fired. Oh, it got him fired so hard. So he filed a lawsuit against Google. And it's not looking too good for him because he has lost the diversity memo challenge. Now, it says here that Google's firing of an engineer over his controversial memo criticizing its diversity policies and politically correct monoculture didn't violate U.S. labor law, a federal agency lawyer concluded. And that is unfortunate. It is. As a person who does pretty much look at, I'm left of center, right? You know, in some cases, definitely more socially, socially liberal than others. Even I can say, like, if you are conservative in freaking Silicon Valley, you will be punished for that. And that should violate U.S. labor law simply because you being punished for your political beliefs and your opinions is horrible and should not happen, right? I am very much a proponent of free speech. Now, statements in Damore's 3,000-word memo regarding biological differences between the sexes were so harmful, discriminatory, and disruptive that they fell outside the protections for collective action in the workplace. An associate general counsel for the National Labor Relations Board wrote in a 6-page memo disclosed on Thursday. Explain to me how they were harmful, discriminatory, and disruptive. That's not refuting what he says. It's not refuting what he said. This is the problem with the way that the discourse works. It's never refuting point for point. It's always just like, well, you said something I didn't like. You hurt my fifis. You must go. And that's ultimately what that particular statement right there is saying. That his writing about the differences between the sexes were so harmful, discriminatory, and disruptive. That people need safe spaces and counseling in order to look at a memo. Whatever happened to sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Right? That mentality clearly doesn't apply to the new generation of people, and it's unfortunate. I'd like any of these people to ever run a job in the internet, right? Like, you have to live by that moniker. If not, you're gonna probably blow your brains out. Now, Damore withdrew his complaint in January, and his lawyer says that she's focusing instead on the engineer's lawsuit accusing the internet giant of harassing him and others over their conservative political views. Now, that to me does feel like more of an appropriate move forward for the lawsuit, because having conservative views, especially in tech and in education, academia, entertainment, very much is under attack, right? I mean, like, honestly, people have a conservative opinion out there, and they're labeled like the worst things on the planet. Whereas, I mean, look at Gamergate, for example. Most Gamergaters are straight up liberal, flat out liberal. But anyone out there who's conservative in Gamergate was labeled as being horrifically terrible people, even if they weren't horrifically terrible people, of which there were a few. But that's the thing, is they attack you for that because you think differently than them. It's a different form of tribalism. It's all nonsense, right? You can't ask for equality and still hide behind a tribalistic label. It just doesn't work that way. In their mind, it does. And in their mind, they've gotten away with it because people won't stand up and say, no, stop it. You suck. It's the world we live in. Anyway, when he was dismissed in August, Damore accused Google of violating the employee right to engage in concerted activity to address workplace issues, a category which the Labor Board has found can include forms of activism ranging from lawsuits to strikes to social media posts. I can see his point for that. At the same time, like, I forget how the article got, or how the memo got moved out there. If it was him doing, I think he released it on his own, I think, right? So it also says that much of Damore's memo was probably protected under the law, the Labor Board's attorney, Jamie Sofier, said in the January 16th memo. But Sofier went on to find that Google discharged Damore only for his discriminatory statements, which aren't protected by labor law. So what you're saying is this guy released a memo, right? It blew up overnight. Like, it blew up overnight. We're talking nationwide news, international news. everyone talking about this thing. You read through it, it's really not disruptive, right? It's really not as bad as she was trying to make it out to be before, the other person writing that memo. But they really framed it as such. It's the horrible, sexist Google memo. This thing is going to get somebody killed. Don't you know? Don't you know that words are going to get this person killed? Didn't look at it that way, because it wasn't like full of, it wasn't like a manifesto where he's gonna like talk about going through the Google campus, you know, and killing women because they shouldn't be there. Like, that is rhetoric that is not protected by the First Amendment, and that is calling on violence, therefore should not happen. But this guy's just like, well, you know, the biological differences between men and women are kind of like this. That's it. His opinion. And they got him for discriminatory statements. Purposefully getting him for discriminatory statements because they knew that it's not protected by labor law. And that's just, it's crap, man. It's crap. Because companies have a duty to comply with equal employment laws and an interest in promoting diversity, employers must be permitted to nip in the bud the kinds of employee conduct that could lead to a hostile workplace, rather than waiting until an actionable hostile workplace has been created before taking action. So basically, if you hurt my fifis, you're gone. If you hurt anyone else's fifis, you're gone. If you say anything that just doesn't go along with the narrative that we've been spinning for a while, you're gone. If you think differently, you're gone. Meaning, if you ever worked for Apple and now come to work for Google, you're automatically gone. That's like the stupidest thing on the planet. That particular statement is so freaking embedded and just dripping with social justice warrior nonsense. It is hard to not want to punch my screen when I read that. The fact that somebody wrote that, and that is in fact a reason to deny him a claim for being fired, a discrimination case, is just, it's insane. Saying they have the right to nip it in the bud. So we live in California is an at-will employment state, obviously. And this is how they're trying to get him. It's like, is it discriminatory comments, or was he trying to lead some kind of Hunger Games revolution against the Capitol, right? Is Alphabet now basically the Capitol, and whoever the hell runs Alphabet is freaking President Snow, and James Damore is like a young plucky Katniss Everdeen with a memo that shoots, I don't know. It's the dumbest thing ever. It's just the dumbest thing ever. Now, the company carefully tailored its message in firing Damore and addressing employees afterward to affirm their right to engage in protected speech while prohibiting discrimination or harassment. But what did he specifically state that's discrimination or harassment? Having an opinion about the biological differences between men and women is not discrimination or harassment. He wasn't in a position to hire anybody. He wasn't in a position to fire anybody. He wasn't in a position to make any kind of changes to the company. It was simply his opinion. And you're telling me that is bad. You're telling me that is wrong. You're telling me that is, creating discrimination and harassment. Or the people who claim to have been discriminated and harassed against because of this memo were just offended on their own right, and apparently that was enough to cost the man his career. Right? Why not use it again as a teachable moment to sit there and go, look, we as a company don't approve of what you say. All right. But you didn't say anything that was like calling for violence, so we can't get you on that. But why don't we use this as a moment to have a discussion about maybe why you think this way? And maybe why other people talked to James and said, this is what you want to do. People, it wasn't like he just released the memo willy-nilly. People told him to release the memo, if I recall correctly. So it says, Google also disciplined one of Damore's coworkers for sending him a threatening email in response to the memo. Oh, so a person who actually did send harassing emails, right, to him. They were just disciplined. But a guy who, just spoke his opinion was fired, right? Yeah. Google declined a comment on Saphir's memo. Damore's attorney didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. The Labor Board's conclusion is consistent with board precedent for decades, which has viewed speech which it creates a hostile environment likely to produce both discord and divisiveness as unprotected, says William Gould IV, who chaired the board under President Bill Clinton. So what you're saying here essentially is, you said something I don't like. You said something, and the guy lost his job. Now, it goes on to say that in the course of protesting working conditions that you can be profane and aggressive and unpleasant, you can be militant and it's still protected, Gould said. However, he said what separates this is the derisiveness and stereotypical characterization of one gender. But if he's talking about actual biology, which is from what I recall, it's been a while since I've read it, but that's what he was referring to. That's not really like attacking one. But we live in this age now where your gender means everything and also means nothing at the same time. It's a very weird space to be. But ultimately, this was really just, really just dumb. And we'll have to wait and see what happens. If he loses a lawsuit, Damore has become such a name on the internet, especially in, I would argue, in conservative circles, given everything that's happened. He could probably find work. I think WikiLeaks reached out to him. He probably started a Patreon or something. I mean, look, here's the thing: is right now Damore is on a speaking tour, or at least I know he's speaking tomorrow night in Portland, Oregon, and I will be there. And Antifa has threatened to show up. Antifa has threatened to protest. Other school groups have threatened to protest, and I'm going. And so this video will be up as a standalone on the channel well before the event begins. And so if you're curious, check back, because you might see some fun stuff coming out of a live stream from there. And the point of me going to this is because I do want to hear what this guy has to say. I want to see if this dude who looks literally like 90 pounds soaking wet is as much of a threat to women in tech as they've made him out to be. They made this guy out to be like, not like the Hitler, but like clearly a Lenin in terms of how this whole thing went down. So watching it play out like that's going to be interesting. Watching the response from people on scene is going to be interesting. And I'll be there to cover it all and bring you guys the truth of what's going on at Portland State in regards to James Damore, who is currently fighting Google over, well, a really crappy situation that they could have used as a teachable moment and instead chose to play the social progressive card, which hopefully won't work out for them in the future.